Well, good morning. My name's Craig Blanchette, and I'm a lifestyle coach, a health coach with Take Shape for Life, soon to be Optavia. And it's my pleasure to bring you this. We're going to do a review of Chapter 2 in Dr. A's Habits of Health. So if you're tuning in on podcast or on Vimeo, you can join us live, actually. We meet 9 a.m. on Fridays, 9 a.m. Pacific. And if you want to join us, go to www.zoom.us. So it's not zoom.com, it's zoom.us. And then the meeting ID, at the top of the screen, you'll click Join a Meeting, and it's 503-974-1671. And so we'd love to have you join us on Fridays at some point. And if you're on live and you want to actually join us or you want to listen to this later, I'm going to post this is a link to the podcast. So this is the Healthy Huddle weekly podcast, which is different than the Health Coach Huddle. So this is more of a generic one where we do where I publish the non-coach healthy kind of trainings. So now we got through that. We want to bring on or introduce. We have our guest host. By the way, all of you guys can sign up to, and I need you to agree to host a chapter in the Habits of Health. And so I think we've got probably the first 5 or 6 already covered, and we got 26 that we need. And so some of you might want to do maybe take 1 or 2 chapters. But what I recommend you doing is going to the front of the book where it has the introduction and the chapters, and scan through those and find one that sticks out to you. Maybe, I was talking to Dan Steitz this morning about doing one of the ones on exercise. So you can check and find one of those that makes sense to you. And then the sooner you check and write your name down, the better chances you'll actually get to be able to host that. And then what I also recommend that folks do is invite one of your clients to join you in hosting that, co-hosting it with you. Just having a little discussion. So anyway, without further ado, though, I want to toss it over to Miss Cleary. Welcome, Barb Cleary. We're excited you are here with us, and we're excited to hear what your highlights as you lead us through Chapter 2. Welcome, Barb.
Well, thank you. And it's interesting, when I first signed up right away for one of the chapters, I didn't realize, because the first opening chapters to me in the book have always kind of melded together because they flow so well. But Chapter 2 is the path, the creation of optimal health. And what Dr. Anderson really hits home about is this state of, you're not sick, but you're really not healthy. Or you may not be healthy. And that actually was, fortunately, that was my case. I wasn't sick in the sense that I had any chronic diseases and I was on medications and the like. I was clearly overweight, but no one ever took the time to ever, get in my face and say, gee, you should lose some weight. I hid it pretty well. But what I liked about what Dr. Anderson said is non-sickness is like purgatory. And, for those of us with that kind of theological framework, purgatory is kind of a state between states. And that's where I was. I was at a state of non-sickness, but I really wasn't healthy. And so he spends the chapter really just kind of focusing on where are you in this whole state of health versus disease. And I liked it on page 13 where he talks about asking yourself questions and starting that process internally to really kind of hone in on where you are and where you want to be. And, he says, is my health improving every day? Well, if I'm not exercising, if I'm not drinking water, if I'm not making the real healthy choices in terms of my fuelings, over time, it's not going to get any better. It's just going to get worse. And so then he goes on to talk about building the habits of health. And I really liked on page 14 and 15, he has, 8 habits that we need to really kind of identify to look at. Are we being mindful in our eating, in our movement? Is our sleep the quality that it is? And these are things that I never really actually thought about. But once I started thinking about them, and I knew that they weren't optimal, and the hope is, and the joy is that there are ways to improve it. And but the first thing that has to happen is that you have to recognize it, and that's where I think the exercises in lesson 1 really, for me, kind of honed in on those things. Pretty much that eating potato chips in front of a television for 4 hours a day is probably not a healthy thing to do. But knowing that isn't enough. Knowing you have to kind of take that action to replace it. And this chapter kind of builds that, kind of sets the stage for the rest of the chapters in my mind. But what I liked about the 8 habits on page 14 and 15, out of those 8, I think 3 really hit me as the most important, that were key. And the first one is strategic behavioral habits. And you can have behavioral habits, good habits, like drinking water, but the key there for me is strategic, and doing things at the proper time, and that necessarily means being mindful. I was in a huddle last night, and Alex was talking a lot about that internal mindfulness. It came back to me as, we really need to be mindful as often as possible. He mentioned the term being, I came away with beside myself, stepping outside of myself and looking at what I'm doing right now, and engaging with people and at this moment in time, and being mindful of what I am imparting to people, hoping that what I have to say, they'll take away a kernel of something that is important to them. But so being strategic, being mindful about our habits, then creating that positive environment. And how often do we surround ourselves by people who are the Debbie Downers and the naysayers? And I was there. I had a lot of people who were just not very positive people. And I can say that my life has changed in 2 years by reaching out and being part of this community of very happy people for the most part. I think every time I come into one of these meetings, there's joy, and that puts your feet on a better course, and your mind on a better course throughout the day. And then the last takeaway from that list of 8 is the habits of support. And I was listening to Craig banter before we got started, and talking about you can't do things by yourself, that most successful people have people with them. And so unless of course you were the castaway. But even he had Wilson, which, well, okay, he had Wilson. But I was curious to find out if there was anybody else who had any of those 8 strategies, or that they actually are, that hit home for them.
You from page 14, the Habits of Health overview?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Some that I don't think too much about. I never thought about inflammation or phytonutrients a whole lot. But moving my body and eating healthy, those were obviously 2 ones that I focus on quite a bit. And like you said, the last one, habit of support, that's like, Wilson, or even Castaway had Wilson. So we need people to do these things.
Love it. For me, it's the habit of creating a positive environment. Like you just talked about, it's this bubble that we've created. And to make no mistake about it, we've actually created this. It wasn't like just happen chance. You chose to come into this environment. Craig and I, a long time ago, chose to create this environment because we were inspired by other people who were creating this environment. So it's not ego in that. But the point really is that we can intentionally create the environment for health to thrive. And if you're going to basically perform well, you want to be in an environment where there's lots of oxygen around and lots of water around and lots of nutrients around. Well, we get a chance to empower people to create that environment around them until they know how to create it for themselves more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you that want to share, and I think that Victoria wants to share, you can actually on your computer, when you click on participants, or if you're on an iPhone, click on more and then raise hand. And so if you guys have something you want to share, no, you're good, Victoria. I saw your actual hand. No, go ahead, Victoria.
Is it my turn? For me, in this chapter, when I examined it this week, I went through it several times actually because I wanted to merge it with the workbook and really try to effectively implement the program this time and really embrace what it entails. And for me, it was the strategic behavioral habits. And my husband oftentimes, when he gets home, will have a cocktail. And so then I'll have a cocktail. Or, hey, I'll have a shot of tequila. Or, hey, yeah, I'll do that. Or, hey, I'll have an extra coffee with some cream. Well, so now I'm seeing that is really a deterrent, not only for my results, but for my overall health. And so we've been talking about that. And so alcohol's out of our house now, so that's good. But, the thing is that when he chooses to imbibe, I make sure that he's not around me. And because it is a trigger for me, and I don't crave it, but it's there. And, oh, yeah, well, he's having one, I'll have one too. Well, it's going to slow down my weight loss. And also behavioral habits. I'm always making snacks for my kids. I have, 2 teenagers in my house that constantly want to be fed. And I found that I will take a taste. I'll take a taste. So now what I do is I put A&D ointment all over my mouth because it's making me stop eating. Who wants to have cod liver oil in their food, right? So, it helps. And so it's just a strategy for me that really works. And so being able to identify the weakest link for me and learn strategies that I can develop over time really did help me.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Victoria. The other thing, too, as you were saying, one of my other takeaways was Dr. Anderson says that life is real.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reality of what your situation, my situation is. And we figure out ways to work around it. It's so that's great that you're moving forward and making those mindful choices. That's great.
Oh, and if we go to a party, I bring these. I usually drink Pellegrino, but these are on sale at Safeway for $1 each. But it's fizzy water. Yeah. As long as I have this in my hand, I'm not going to be eating anything at a party, and I'm not going to be drinking anything at a party. And so this really works. I got to say, and we're pretty social people, so that and my Earl Grey tea is really helping.
Mhm.
Great. Hey, Miss Linda, you have a question or a comment?
Well, it's more of a comment, but I think and I really like that idea, Victoria, of what you talked about, of putting is it cod liver oil around your mouth or something? Because that would stop me for sure before I mindlessly put something in my mouth. But I think so often, if I wasn't coaching these past 2 years, I don't think I would still be engaging my health at the level that I am today. And it's not perfect at all. But it forces me to stay engaged, because when I tell a new person that's starting on program, you've got to get your water in, guess what I'm thinking of? I've got to get my water in. And a weak area for me is the habits of moving. I think about it, and it stops there. So it's the opposite of Craig and Alex, probably. And we did a lot of walking at Disneyland. But you feel so much better even with a big old belly. So that's something that I want to incorporate more, even if it's just getting out and taking a walk. So it's helpful for me to think about what's the weakest link, besides reading the things that I'm doing well on. And this was a great list of just simple stuff to go over. So, and thanks for what you shared, Barbara. I really appreciated that overview. It's been a while since I've dove in. So,
Well, the interesting thing too that I liked about the chapter is that, you know, after that section on the 8 habits that are most important, he talks about putting it all together. And it really, that whole idea of the 3 gears that we talk about, you know, in healthy body, healthy mind, healthy finances, if our gears are not working in terms of making healthy eating choices and making healthy movement choices and being mindful, if we're not getting all of those 8 gears in motion together, we're going to stall. And so I really liked that part of it, that our bodies aren't made to work in isolation, and our bodies and our minds have to work together too, and more so our minds, because I think our mind kind of drives what our body does. So anyway, hey, Daniela, how are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you, Barbara. This has been great conversation. I love it. And I love your analogy with the gears, because what it made me think of is when gears are together, one action can set all those gears into motion. Just one, right? One gear turns just a little bit and they all start to turn. So that was an exciting analogy for me in my mind, just in terms of helping people move forward, helping ourselves move forward, is it just takes one action, right?
Right. Or one to derail it, you know.
Well, yes, and it will. You're right. You stop one thing,
and that's this is the thing that I've been struggling with, is to have that positive mindset. So while you're thinking about them all moving together, I'm thinking about, well, if one doesn't move, we stall out completely. So you think about it in a positive way, and I'm still thinking about it in sort of a negative way, but we all get there.
But look at all of this. Do you see every square on this screen? Every square here is a gear. All it takes, as long as we're together, it just takes one of us to say something, do something in the right direction. And as long as we're connected, we'll all go just a little bit more.
Well, and Barb, what I liked is I've talked about awareness in my own working on awareness, and you like caught yourself right there, because you saw her say something and then you kind of flipped it, and then you saw yourself flip it and then talked about it, and you see it, so you can change it.
Well, and that's the thing. The biggest takeaway globally, I guess, for this chapter for me is that whole idea of being mindful, of recognizing, because you're not going to do anything if you're not going to see a problem if you don't recognize it. You're not going to solve it. But Kim, you had something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, it's very, very in line with what's been said and exactly what Daniela brought out. But the power in this chapter to me, and I love how you highlighted both of those, is we clearly get a list of what the habits of health are, those 8 categories. And that was a little eye-opening to me the first time I read it, because to be honest, I started out on this path just wanting to change my weight, and maybe not realizing all the other factors that go into play. And then the part on page 17 where it talks about the art of compounding, the gears are a great analogy. But yeah, just the compounding. And I love how you said, Daniela, about how we're all gears right here, because I think that environment, like what Linda said too, just being in community, how powerful that is. And I think recently I didn't have the best of Decembers, I would say. Realized that if I wasn't connected as a coach and really engaged in this community, that could have been a really pivotal time for me to completely go the other direction. But because I was connected, my mentors, my coaches, even my clients, they wouldn't let me fall too far. I felt like, if you use a mountain climbing analogy, and I had a harness on, if it was up to my own powers, I probably would have fallen all the way down the mountain, but I had other people holding my rope, so I didn't fall very far. And so I love that kind of getting stopped in my tracks and changing just a few little things for myself. I've also, just like these cogs in the wheel or the machine or whatever analogy you want to use, I'm seeing in my client group just a renewed spirit of focus, and we can do this. And when one of us gets off track, there's a lot of other people there to pick up the slack. So
thank you.
Mhm.
And
I like that visual of falling, because if you're visualizing you're climbing this mountain and you got all these ropes and everything, and you don't fall all the way to the bottom, but you just and you've got other people underneath you to catch you and then rearrange you, to get you back on your track again. I like that visual. What I was going to say, what kind of reached out with the 8 habits was the habits of good sleep. I kind of have a problem with that. Some days I sleep real well, and other days I just can't sleep at all. And I think we kind of underestimate how important good sleep is. And I just think of the disadvantages of not getting enough sleep. I would think it would affect your mood and your ability to cope with weaknesses and things that come along. You're probably going to give into if you're really, really tired. You're like, oh, I got so much to do today, I'm just going to grab this, and you grab the wrong thing. So I think getting that sleep is really, really important.
Yeah, and isn't it great that Dr. Anderson has identified all of these things and put it in a book, so we can always go back to, and I can't tell you how many times I go back and refer to, for example, chapter 17 that deals with sleep. And the idea of also, for me, like Linda, I sometimes think about exercise, but, not so much actually take the next step to do something. So I'm frequently referring to those chapters, I think it's 13 and 14 or 14 and 15, that deal with exercise and just some of the things that we can do in our daily life. So, it's not like you have to do what Craig does and, be out there on a bike or run marathons in order to be healthy. There are some things that we can do within the limits of our own experience. But anyway, thank you, Eileen. I like that. Carlos, you wanted to say something.
Thank you for sharing this quick overview with us. And one thing, I don't know who mentioned it earlier, where we seem to be finding to do one thing at a time instead of, like Daniela said, the cogwheel, where one thing rolls to the other.
Can you get closer to your mic?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, is that better?
Not much, a little bit.
Not much. Hang on. I'm in a guest room, so I don't know.
There, that's better.
Yeah. So going back to the cogwheel or domino effect, like Daniela was mentioning earlier, one thing that I kind of try to install in my clients is, not only that same concept, but especially with moms that are like, I'll get in shape, or I find time when my kids when they go to college or whenever they get married, and one thing that the book touches is, you only get one chance at this. So I always bring it back to that concept, and that's most of the time that gets them back on track. So as far as this chapter, the whole art of compounding is really awesome to share with clients when you run into somebody and said, I'm going to start this healthy, pattern later on or after this holiday. I actually have a shirt that says there's no off season. There's and I love that shirt because people always like, oh, after Valentine's or after St. Patrick's. I'm like, if you go through the whole calendar, there's always something. There's always a party. So the art of compounding on this chapter is really awesome to share with people.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree 100% because it's you have one successful day and it just builds and it inspires me to have more successful days. But it is true that that if I didn't have if I hadn't surrounded myself with people who are going to support that, I would be easily derailed, very easily derailed. So Dr. Anderson finishes up the chapter with that really nice guide to on page 18 with breaking it down into the phases of moving from where you are to really where you want to be in optimizing your health for the rest of your life. And so I use that quite frequently to that's my reality, here, where is my current reality on this table? And, somewhere in the middle is where I kind of see myself. So, and you might want to take a look at that too and see where you are and see where we can help each other be where we really want to be. Does anyone have a comment about that?
I do actually, Barb, here, just as we're closing up the TSFOU, is one of the things I never really knew that coaching would be this practical for me in my own personal journey. If you were to talk to somebody and say, are you going to be working on your health for the rest of your life? Or for a long time, I guess. And most everybody would say, yeah, well, I'm going to be trying to do things here and there for the rest of my life. And so are you going to have a job for a good portion of your life? Well, what if those were the same thing? Think about it. What if you could combine those two things that you're planning on doing anyway? And I just dawned on me this morning, as we're all saying, all of us that are health coaches are basically making our vocation paying attention to health. There's no downside to that. It seems like to me. And so many of you have said here today, Linda started, I don't think I'd be as healthy as I am today if I wasn't a health coach. I'm certain I wouldn't be. Yeah. And so from that standpoint, we don't want people to coach because we want them to, right? I want them to be part of our community because we need them. But what about the byproduct of what that actually does for them, right? And whether they coach a lot of people or a few people, it doesn't really matter because you're still in the game. And so I see a lot of heads nodding right now. And really,
yeah, I just want to jump in there and say how important it is for us to keep going. And sometimes we identify with our thoughts that are saying, oh, they're not buying in. They haven't come to the community yet. I want my client to be there and experience this. You ever have that? Like where you just feel that tension? And that's usually that you're taking that on yourself as if it's your job to get this person to do that. When in essence, if you flip that back on you and use that as an opportunity for you to work on you, to become more free in what you're doing, to become more free in it. And that in itself becomes the gift to that other person, is that you give them that space to not be ready for this. And you model how good this is by staying in it, even though they haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
And it comes back around. It's amazing how that works.
Oh, thank you, Alex. That's a perfect way to close. So thank you, Barb, for taking us through chapter 2. Nicely done. Well prepared. Loved the content. And good job, the rest of you guys, for dialing in and just jumping in and having plenty of content. I love that I didn't talk hardly at all on this. You guys just ran the show, and I just got to sit back and watch you and listen and learn from all of you guys. So thank you so much. So for those of you that are watching this live, of course, you can go to subscribe to the podcast. It's called the Healthy Huddle Podcast. And you can listen to these each week. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is invite your clients to come here to go through the chapter with us, for the first 30. And if they can't make it live, take the time and get them plugged in and subscribed. Actually walk them through it. Now, you might be saying to yourself right now, well, I don't even know how to do it. Okay, let's start with you. Right? Let's just let's get you plugged in and get you subscribed today. And then you can then take that time and do that to somebody else. And then they are empowered to just be able to plug in. And so awesome, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of you listening online or on the recording for joining us. We'll be back again next week for chapter 3.